Hi everyone, welcome to the Value Driven Marketing Podcast. I'm Elena, your host, and I'm very excited to introduce my guest today, Miruna Dragomir. She's the Chief Marketing Officer of Planable, a content collaboration tool for social media teams. Miruna has been leading the growth efforts at Planable for the past 4 years, and in that time, the company has grown 50 times. And prior to Planable, Miruna has been part of Uber's marketing team and Oracle's social media team. Miruna, welcome to the show. Super excited to have you here.
Hi, Elena. Super excited to be here. I'm glad to be part of your show.
Awesome. So I wanted to kick things off with a very serious question, and that is, what was your dream job as a child? What did you hope to become?
I like that question just because I feel like most people have a very different background, especially people in marketing. I'm assuming very few children in the world were sitting in their youth thinking, marketer, B2B marketer, that's what I want to be. But I think for me, for some reason, the profession of a teacher really was fascinating for me. It's probably just because it's the first people that you meet in their professional environment. But for me, it seemed very, I think it seemed powerful to me, which is why it was very, something I really wanted to become. And I used to practice. My parents got me one of those boards where you could write with chalk. It was very little, but I used to line up all my dolls, regardless whether they were monkeys or Barbie dolls or whatever they were. And I would just teach random things. And I would also do it in English. Although I did not know English at that age, I felt like I should speak a different language. So
Gibberish English.
Gibberish English, just Romanian, but with an Latin at the end.
Wow, awesome. That's super interesting. I can relate to that. My parents are teachers, so I know what you're talking about.
I can assume that for you was definitely a career that you wanted to pursue at some point.
Yeah, I'm maybe hoping one day I can teach something related to marketing, but as I age.
That's awesome.
Cool. So can we start from here? Can you let me know how you started with Planable, and maybe more specifically how you decided to make the switch from, Uber being a unicorn to a startup? How was it like?
I think it wasn't that well planned in the sense that I did not have one of those, marked with year by year the plan for my career, but I didn't know at a very early stage in my career that at some point I would want to join somewhere, something smaller. And I started with the biggest of them all, with Oracle, which is one of the biggest corporations. Then I moved on to the Uber, which was a unicorn, and it was a scale up already, but it still had, when I joined, it was still very startup oriented, just because it had all the different markets, had their own sort of startup, but with the capital and the benefits of a corporation almost. So it was a very interesting time to be part of that team. And then at some point, I just felt that I wanted to make a change, to be part of something even smaller. And I think what I needed to feel, that kind of impact that you can only find in a company that's just a few people in terms of size. And Planable was exactly that. It was the three founders, the three co-founders, and one developer. That was it. That was the entire team when I joined. So it was very early on, and it was that impact that I mentioned was easy to see. I mean, once I started to have an impact that is.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I can totally relate to that. And I'm guessing you were the first full-time dedicated marketing hire?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, great. And in that meantime, Planable has grown tremendously. So 50 times, that's a lot. Can you walk me through how that growth happened? Which channels were performing the best, are performing the best in terms of user acquisition, which tactics?
Yeah, so I think, when I started at the beginning, since we were that small, we were not generating a lot of revenue at that point, or we did not have a fresh round to be able to kind of have the funds to accelerate our efforts. So we just did what we could do, and that was a lot of organic tactics. At that point, the whole growth hacking madness was going on. So all the potential tactics that we would read online, we would just try. So it wasn't really, at the beginning, it was just about, driving something in as soon as possible, just to be able to catch a breath and to be able to plan a bit long term. Mm-hmm. But I do think we had a good idea at that point, because we started with the blog almost at the beginning. The co-founder, one of the co-founders, Vlad, had this idea from the start. He had this thing for SEO. He read about it a lot, so he wanted to try anything out. Mm-hmm. And the blog appeared pretty early on, and we just kept on going with it. If you ask me now, I don't know why or how, because it wasn't working for sure at the beginning. No blog ever is, in these ages. But yeah, we just kept going with it. And at some point it paid off. It started to pay off, and it became one of those evergreen channels for us that's driving revenue constantly, and not always due to, fresh efforts that we invest.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I was going to ask if you can maybe pinpoint at what time it actually started paying off and driving users. Is there a time where you realize, okay, people are now coming in, they're signing up, and, they're coming to the blog and then signing up? How long did it take?
It took a while, not necessarily because, it took, I think, for about a year and a half at least. But it's not necessarily because that's how long it takes everyone. It took us that long just because we didn't, at the beginning, we tried to go big. It felt like the right thing to do at that time, to go for the big keywords, for the fancy, to the volume. The volume was just, it was blinding us, and it was so attractive. And once we attracted that volume, but didn't got the rewards for it because it wasn't necessarily the right target, that's when we started shifting our strategy and focusing on something more that was less, appealing in terms of volume, but that was a lot more relevant to our audience. And that's when the customers and the users started coming in from the blog directly.
Mm-hmm. So you'd say that would be the tipping point, that shift in from broad, which I think is appealing, and you're sort of feeling like you're missing out if you don't go broad to cover, the big volume keywords, to going to, long tail, more niche focused ones.
Yeah, I think, it's hard to always to kind of say that was a horrible mistake to go broad at first, because it did help us gain authority, because we managed to rank on those broad keywords, and we managed to come on, the first page of Google with quite a few articles. And that for sure gained us a lot of credibility in Google's eyes. And it got the long tail strategy to work a lot faster than maybe it would have if we started with it from the very first start.
Okay. I think that's an interesting way to put things. And now you went way beyond the blog. You have already a video course. You have your own podcast, long form content. So I would be interested to learn more about how do you go to create value for Planable audience and customers through your marketing.
Yeah, it's. What we've discovered in time and after a few mistakes was that it's all intersected, right? If you don't, creating value isn't just this kind of very selfless act that you do as a company. It is what you need to really drive customers. That's It's pure, even if you look at it from a very cynic perspective, it's still what you have to do, as long as that value intersects with your own interests as a company. So I think at some point we really grasp the two parts, to do the discovery, to really research our initiatives before we decide on them, before we even came up with ideas. We started researching, just going into communities, looking at what our target talks about, what they ask each other, in groups, on forums, on blogs, anywhere, and then try to find which one of those is related to us in a big way, not necessarily just one of those you can be the punchline at the end, because that doesn't, if that punchline doesn't make sense, it's not going to work. And yeah, we started, once we figured that was the problem with some of our initiatives that we've done in the past and that we're not bringing any kind of customers, we kept ourselves accountable on that. All of us in the marketing team. One of us would come up with an idea and the others would always have this reminder. How does that relate to what we do? I mean, it's great. We want to help our audience, but how does that relate to Planable? Is that something that we can really help with our product, or only just our content? And it's been a journey, a learning journey. And yeah, but we always start with the research. I think that's what makes our content, what we do to ensure it's valuable.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Super interesting. And I think, yeah, it's a big trap in which you can fall, where you come up with ideas and you maybe fall in love with them and it sounds great, but then, okay, what is the end goal? And as you mentioned, how does that intersect? And that kind of connects to another question that I have is, how do you make sure, you build something that's valuable, that's relevant, actually helps your customers be better at what they do, and how do you connect and make sure you connect that to revenue as well?
Yeah, I think it can sometimes appear that the two are opposite, or that they're parallel in some way. But I really don't think they are. It's like a Venn diagram. I mean, as you can always use a Venn diagram, but in this case, I feel like it fits perfectly, just because you have what value would mean for your audience, and it can mean a lot of things. Maybe we're targeting agencies. Maybe we could find the insight that a lot of agencies have dogs. A lot of agency owners have dogs. We could write something pet related, but that would have nothing to do with Planable. So that's when you have to consider what you do as a company and what you can help with, and what it would make sense for you to help with. That's the part that I feel a lot of time is missing. And I feel like you really put it in a very good, you made a very good point when you said that we can fall in love with an idea, because yes, you can empower creativity to such a point that sometimes you can fully derail from the objective, from the main goal of that initiative. So as long as you always remind yourself who we are, what we help with, and find the complementary aspects that you can achieve through your content, that's going to hit the mark.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. So yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I'm quite curious to learn, how do you also balance the long run and the short term, because all of those assets that you're building, they do take a lot of time. So podcasting takes a lot of time, blogging, and even finding, the angles, the right topics to approach, as you mentioned. So everything that you're building as a content, as an educational content, takes a lot of time. And how do you balance between, actually investing enough time to build the right type of assets and content, and driving results short term? Because of course, as a startup, you want to see traction and things moving.
It's definitely a balancing act, and it changes according to the stage you're in as a company. At the beginning, we would focus more on the short term, because that was, we needed it. We needed the customers. At some point, when we felt like we got the snowball rolling, and that big chunk of our audience would come in just organically from everything that we've done up till that point, when we felt that stability, we could invest in more long-term tactics. I think right now our main short-term tactic is it's paid marketing. It's mainly search ads, and that it's bringing it's ensuring that kind of constant flux of customers. Its ROI is basically, it's mathematical. So once you figure that out, and you know how to replicate it, it's you can just scale and scale and scale on that front, and that allows us to have a bit of time to focus on bigger initiatives that can take up to 6 months to simply build, and then another 6 months for them to start bringing the first customers. So it's quite a long time for a startup, but due to our ads, we can do that.
So it's basically a mix of tactics that are going to, be like a quick fix, or, work quick on the short term to kind of give you time to plan ahead, research, and actually focus on the building.
Yeah, and I think another thing that we've started doing at some point was to plan our targets accordingly. So when we set our targets, when we said, okay, we need to scale, we were all realistic and had enough experience at that point to know that we need to scale does not mean this quarter. We need to scale, we need to start scaling this quarter, but we're not going to see any kind of results this quarter. So we started planning the targets and pinpointing them in advance with the idea that, okay, so you do the efforts to scale in Q1, and you're probably going to see the results of that in Q2 or Q3, so that those targets should reflect your efforts from Q1.
So did that was something that came naturally to you, or was it something that you've learned as you went ahead, that things are going to take time and we need to plan for being patient?
Yeah, I think it definitely came with the experience of, establishing targets without, at some point, they weren't necessarily built from forecasts, from real estimations. And we also realized that, you need to give the team that, you need to give yourself that in order to allow for that time to invest in long term, because otherwise, if you always establish for yourself unrealistic targets that don't take into account what they have to do, it's always going to be, you're going to provoke this kind of failure sentiment that's no one can resolve. So yeah, that's why we started really thinking about the targets with better estimations, more accurate estimations.
Yeah, and I guess having wins as well kind of allows the team to build some morale, be confident, like we know what we're doing, and kind of helps you moving forward and push forward.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. And could you try and maybe isolate, like if you were to say the top 2-3 marketing initiatives that have brought the most impact at Planable, and maybe also try to kind of isolate some key factors why those managed to bring such an impact?
Yeah, I think SEO is definitely one of those, and that's mostly through the blog for us. And that's, why that works and has worked is quite self-explanatory. It's just because you manage to reach the right people. If you do it right, if you plan it right, if you research the right keywords, then you're able to basically find your target at the right moment in their journey where they want to buy, or at least they're close to that. The second tactic would definitely be performance marketing. That also took a while for us to really nail down and get to that positive, beautiful, constant ROI that we're all searching for. And then, there's the big tactics, the big content initiatives that I wouldn't say at this point, they don't feel yet like one of those well-oiled machines that you know what to build, you launch it, and then it works. It's still a lot of trial and error then, but I do feel like we're making a lot of progress and that our audience is appreciating more and more the content that we're building.
And because you also mentioned something around mistakes, I was wondering if you could try maybe think back of 2, 3 mistakes, or however many come to mind, that, you've made along the way, and those were a big learning or a significant learning for your team, and what were those?
Yeah, the biggest top of mind for me right now is building content that we spend a lot of time and effort into without thinking about the long-term gain of it. Just because we didn't plan it or didn't ask the question whether it was evergreen, of whether it will grow organically on its own or not. So that kind of made us invest, 6-7 months into an initiative, then launch it, see a spike of a couple of weeks, and then watch it die on its own.
Desperation. What?
Yeah.
It's called.
Yeah, exactly. So from that, we've learned that we really, really need to think about that impact versus effort a lot more often, and to really try to be realistic when we do, because that effort part is always undermined somehow. It always feels like it's a low-hanging fruit, and it almost never is. I mean, some of these initiatives, even you sometimes think that, an ebook is going to be super easy to write just because it's in your own hands and you can do your own thing. But even that, if you want to write it well, it's going to take a lot of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. And I'm wondering whether you can share a bit about what are the North Star metrics that you keep an eye on, so just to make sure you're on the right track, so you're focused on the long run. You also mentioned you should pay attention to effort versus impact. So what key metrics are you looking at?
Yeah, so definitely the end result. So I always look at the customers we bring through our marketing channels, specifically as I try to make everything attributable as possible. And whatever is, every channel, every tactic that we do is responsible for its own ROI. Mm-hmm. And we always look at the customers and at the money brought in from marketing, and then the kind of check, let's say control KPI is the CAC versus LTV that we always, not always, but every quarter we make sure we do the math on it just to make sure that we haven't crossed any lines. We haven't invested too much, which, isn't a problem unless you want it, unless it was planned. So yeah, those, I would say those are the two.
Yeah, I think lifetime value is very important because, it can drive in customers, but if they churn really quickly and then you pay more to acquire them, then, they actually spend with you or do business with you, then at the end of the day, you'll be out of the business fairly quickly.
Yeah. LTV for us is the way we determine the ROI of everything. So we always have to be as accurate as possible with it, and we try to go as segmented as possible. So we sometimes, do the LTV for each type of customer or for each type of package that they choose, of plan, to make sure that we're not fooling ourselves when we look at the ROI.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And there's I think it's fun. Question is, where would you say is your best use of your marketing budgets, and then maybe the worst right now?
I'd still say the best is ads, is performance, just because, yes, as I said, the ROI is there, and where the ROI is positive and big, that's the best use of your money. In terms of the worst, we have tried for a while to do PR, which I still think is absolutely great. But I feel like for us, it's not the right time at this moment. I feel like that budget would be better spent if we were to do sponsorships, or if we were to attend Planable to events, or reach the community this way. Seeing as the earned PR is quite difficult in our particular industry, to reach your audience, not whatever generic publication that you can, which, yeah, it's not going to prove any kind of ROI.
Mm-hmm. So stay more focused rather than going a bit broad, which seems to be PR at the moment.
Yeah. It was, I feel like it can be absolutely amazing for some companies and for some industries. And it's for sure going to become a priority back for Planable as well, but probably at a later stage.
Yeah, I think there's a time and place for everything, and you kind of have to focus on of course, keep the big goal in mind, but also, what's going to keep you alive in 3-6 months. So have that balance you have a lot of balls to keep in balance.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Sounds super interesting. I also wanted to ask you, of course, you mentioned you're probably in the most crowded market, I would say, which is marketing tools. A lot of noise, a lot of competitors. I'm wondering, what would you advise a B2B marketer working in a very crowded space? How should they approach their marketing strategy to, reach their audience in a place where there's so much noise, so many companies offering a solution that can solve the same problem? So what would your recommendations be?
Well, first you got to be extremely aware of what you're doing differently, and I'm sure it is something when you decide to join a crowded market, it's because you found a gap, you found something that's a need that's left uncovered. And if that's the case, you really need to know that need extremely well, to defend it, and to go all in. And I mean, own it until the end, just because it can sometimes feel like you should change course and that can be a good choice as well. But for us in particular, the secret was to not to do one thing, but do it well. That's we found that need that's uncovered, the collaboration part that's really, it's not addressed properly. Most tools don't have the features needed, and the features that are there, they're just not, they're add-ons. They're kind of asterisks after the entire base of the product was built. And that can be seen. It translates into a user experience that's not seamless. So that's what we bring to the table. That's why we built Planable. So we obviously fix it in a more straightforward way. And we went with that need everywhere, and then to the smallest detail in the product, that collaboration is there. It's built in. It's always the priority for us, and we say it everywhere. When customers ask us why we don't do anything else, the reason is just because we wanted to do one thing to perfection. That's our thing.
So know your big differentiator and what painful problem you solve, and lead with that message, essentially.
Yeah, show your audience, show your stakeholders what you do differently, and just shout it from the rooftop. Just don't blend in. That's the only way you can compete in a very crowded market.
Absolutely. Okay. I do have one final question. Hopefully, we can still go into this as well. So if you were to look at, future growth at Planable, what marketing levers are you pulling? How do you see growth, and what marketing levers are you pulling to get there?
We're preparing. We've got a lot of irons in the fire, as the saying goes. What we are trying to do is to always adapt our tactics to the level where Planable is, because Planable is growing, and you need to always, scale those tactics to keep up with the company that you've grown so far. So we have a lot of projects that are a lot bigger right now. We're doing very a lot fewer smaller one-time tactics that can move the needle very, very little. So our main priorities right now is to go bigger. That is very vague, I know, but it mainly means that we're investing more in fewer projects.
So focus is the keyword here, focus and consistency.
Yes.
Which sounds very simple, but I think it's so hard to do. Like I'm experimenting this myself, and with our agency, it's so difficult to stay focused and just, say no to anything else.
We try to really have this kind of 80-20 rule, which means that, we try to 80% of our time to dedicate to the tactics that have proven themselves and to double down on those, and 20% is left for experiments. You always need experiments. You always want to try something new, and that's okay. That's normal. But if it cannot be the focus once you've found your go-to, once you've found a few channels that work already.
And you cannot scale just on experimentation alone. You need something that works and replicate and grow that, and then find out what else could be the next thing or the next tactic that's going to help. Awesome.
Exactly.
Awesome. Thank you, Miruna, so much. This has been super insightful, and I'm sure everyone listening will definitely walk away with some interesting ideas. So thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I definitely hope it was useful, and that sharing my mistakes helped someone out there.
It definitely does. Thank you so much.